Welcome students. The most awaited document of annual financial statement, which is budget, is already in place. Nirmala Sitharaman has read it out with considerable changes both in the methodology of how they would get the revenue and expenditure and also the outlook about what next year would be like. So without any delay, let's begin. What is the change in budget 2024 and what is relevant for examination? We would study that as part of this video. So in this budget 2024, the major change is about the first thing that has to be focused is about where the rupee is coming from and where it is going. It gives you the picture about the revenue and expenditures and how the fiscal deficit is moving on. So the rupee is coming from various sources. This pictorial representation would be seen carefully to understand that the majority is coming from borrowings. It has not changed. But when it comes from the taxation, it is from direct taxes, which is with corporation tax and income tax, and not the GST, which used to be earlier case. So this difference, if you can notice, that means the direct taxation has increased. When direct taxation has been increasing, in next slides we would look at what would be the impact on inflation, etc. If it's clear, then what about the other part of it? Non-tax receipts, and when it comes to non-debt capital receipts. This non-tax and non-debt capital receipts are becoming minuscule, which is very much less. And even excise duties and other kind of indirect taxes are also reduced, which we will see in detail in next part. So hope you understood the revenue part of it, how the receipts are, and then if you look at the expenditure. As usual, the majority of expenditure is to give states a share of taxes and duties. You know, right? Income tax has a ratio of share which will to be given to states. Even the GST has a share which has to be given to states. And this share is as usual considerable. And the next part is interest payments. This projects that in last few years, government has taken huge amount of debt and the interest payments make 1/5 of it. And the other places where the money is to be given for the state's expenditure are as part of centrally sponsored schemes and finance commission's recommendations, if any. The defense budget is 6 to 8%, which is not a great increase. Of course, it has been stabilized with already existing private sector participation and no imminent threats immediately, which would change if possible if any threats come as part of the financial year. And when it comes to pension, even the pension burden has reduced. If you look at most of the cases, the pensions has been rationalized with new pension system, and more than that, with EPFO's active participation, the pension burden has been reduced. And the last thing that has reduced the pension burden is the defense pensions. I think you can comment below what scheme has brought that change when it comes to pensions. If you have commented it, it is Agniveer, which has reduced at least the immediate contribution of pensions which are to be contributed by Government of India. So this is broader picture about how expenditure and revenues are, receipts and expenditure, rupee coming from and rupee going to. If it's clear, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the budget, and this part will be very carefully observed. And for that, let's understand how the impact of taxation would be on inflation and other part. So before going to the impact, we need to understand how direct and indirect taxes would behave and what impact it would create, and the actual impact would be noticed practically and the estimation would be there hereafter. So direct taxes would reduce the liquidity. That means with direct taxes, the liquidity being reduced, you can expect inflation to reduce. Yes? And with indirect taxes, inflation will increase. So, if you understand this part, the impact of the budget's changes in taxation system would be clear to estimate the future in next coming few months. The indirect tax has been reduced in considerable items and the direct taxation has been increased on few. So we can expect the fiscal policy to control inflation and it may aid RBI's monetary policy to keep inflation well within control. It should not subdue the growth is the only concern. Otherwise, the inflation would be in the control in rest of the financial year is what we could expect from this budget. So, if we get into the nitty-gritties, this is the only place where direct taxes are at least reduced with change in tax slabs. The new change proposed is in 0 to 3 lakh bracket, there is no taxation at all. And other than that, there is another part which is standard deduction, which earlier used to be 50,000 has been raised to 75,000 now. And with this change, the maximum benefit anyone can get would be somewhere around 17,500 rupees in taxation. That's the maximum. So there is slight benefit here. If he is very simplistic and is part of the middle class and paying taxes, then slight relief is seen. But if you do something extravaganza, if you keep investing in mutual funds, if you keep investing in stock market and find some other revenue streams, sorry my friend, this budget has increased slabs for every possible method. First direct tax that has been increased is securities transaction tax, which used to be 0.1% and it has been doubled to 0.2%. Correspondingly, we can expect stamp duties of states to also increase. So this is first thing. The second one is about long-term capital gains, which used to be 10%, has now been increased to 12.5%. If you look at that, there is 25% increase in this long-term capital gains. For your information, long-term capital gains are gains that are due to the selling of property or shares or something else over 1 year. That means earlier there used to be an incentive for not selling immediately and going for a speculative trade. This is not speculative trade. Even though it is not speculative trade, it has been levied 12.5% of tax. Okay. If this is the case, my friend, what about the short-term capital gains, which already used to be 15%, now it has been made 20%. That means even this tax, which usually would be called as Pigovian tax. What Pigovian tax is? It is about reducing the negative externalities on society due to any kind of activity. They would call short-term capital gains as Pigovian, as it is mostly a speculative trade. That means they are not investing, but they are trading it. It is huge again. Okay, did that end there? No. If you inherit a property earlier, it may be on gold, on real estate, it used to be offset by something called indexation. That means, suppose you bought a property and your gains have been 30 times, but even inflation increased equivalently, then it is not considered as an extra benefit or extra profit. The offset of indexation is now been removed on gold, and indexation benefit has been removed on gold and real estate, which is also an equivalent of increasing the direct tax, because earlier the direct tax would have been reduced this way, now it has been removed. Okay, this is the case. My friend, if this is the case, then any extra activity other than simply saving in FDs, is it disincentivized? No. I would say one thing that is benefiting the investment is removal of angel tax. That means a normal middle class, if he does something extravaganza, would be taxed. But if there's an investor who is a venture capitalist who would be paying corporation tax or something else, from that part, angel tax has been removed. So you can find considerable investment in new startups and that taxation will be removed. So this is one thing which would reduce the direct taxation. Other than that, there are increases in direct taxes. Now let's move on to the part where the indirect taxes are considered. If you look at this part from the union budget, there are few items on which the indirect tax has been reduced. The indirect tax, in the sense, this duty, custom duty, if you import them. First one was on gold and silver bars. So we can expect more gold and silver bars to be imported as this has been reduced. So current account deficit may increase. Even the critical minerals which are essential for energy transition, from lithium to nickel, many of them had different slabs from 10% to 5%, 2.5%, 5%. All of them has been made nil. Cancer drugs, active pharmaceutical ingredients which are responsible for making cancer drugs, nil. Even the duty on them has been nullified, not reduced, completely nullified. Mobile phones, earlier 20% was the scenario, now it has been 15%. So will that impact domestic manufacturing? You can comment. Other wet white and crust and finished leather, it used to be 10% earlier, now it is nil. Hope you understood how the reduction in these would reduce the input cost for most of the industries. Suppose there is diamond polishing or gold ornament industry, the input pressure, which is cost to push inflation, would be reduced. So the impact of inflation is again nullified. So government is ready to address the issue of inflation, but the method chosen is to put direct taxes and reduce indirect taxes, which may burden middle class. Now, if you look at the impact of that has been due to some data that has been considered for past couple of years. The weighted average contribution to GDP has been considered and they are trying to justify the changes in taxation. Private fixed capital consumption has been reducing and government's final consumption expenditure has been increasing. Okay. But the gross fixed capital formation has also increased and it has been significant. If you have seen yesterday's video of economic survey, you would get the same idea. Now, going further, if you look at the same part of it, now you'll understand that it's not about the idea of this data, but government found some interesting data that earlier people used to save, private savings used to go to banks, and these banks used to lend to private companies. And these private companies now are finding another method to directly take these savings. That means instead of going for debt, they are now going for equity. That means the stock market is benefiting. That's the reason why these taxes are being levied. Government says When Nirmala Sitharaman's speech says these things are to be normalized because market is going to be a bubble if it is not done. A real estate boom now is going to be a bubble if it is not done, if indexation is not removed. So this will disincentivize frequent transactions. That's the reason at least the impact on stock market was that though it has rised on expectations, it has stopped at least at a level. It has reached a saturation at least for the last couple of days. Okay. So this observation was taken as justification for why direct taxes has been increased and indirect taxes has been reduced. Now, if you look at the sectoral allocation, now the receipts part has been completed. Now let's go to the expenditure part. The sectorial, however, in 6.2 lakh crores, defense has got good chunk. It has not increased further, but yes, it's a good chunk. Other than that, we got roads and highways, which includes both Gram Sadak Yojana of rural and urban infrastructure push. The capital expenditure has been rising, and this is a significance of how the capital formation would be aided. Now, coming to the railways part, coming to the consumer affairs part, it has been more or less at an expected level, which is 2.5 lakh crores. It's okay. But when it comes to agriculture, there is mixed feeling. At 1.27 lakh crores, it sounds healthy. If you get into the nitty-gritties, there are both sides of it, which would be looked into later on. So the focus now, let's look at one particular sector, which is rural sector. Rural consumption was subdued because most of the rural area is predominantly agro-based, and with agro-based and in El Nino year with not so good crop loss, rural economy was stumbling. The urban area though was not bad in terms of the shape of the economy, rural was suffering, which was evident even in the economic survey as well. To address that, rural economy has been pushed. Now there is no complete shift from the trickle down effect where the capital expenditure would be focused and logistics would be improved, but there is at least to some extent a different scheme and different methodology of giving direct benefit transfers. Did they choose it? Let's get into the nitty-gritty. The schemes which focus completely on the rural and agro sector, of course, you know NABARD, right? NABARD is responsible for that. So this NABARD's supervision and NABARD's data has been taken, and with that a lot of targets are being analyzed. First one is about Gramin Awas Yojana, where this Gramin Awas Yojana, at least they say they gave good number of housing so far. So this year it has been reduced significantly. Even the targets have been reduced, housing completed are been reduced, sanctioned also has been reduced. So this data shows no more rural housing. Allocation would be increased as most of them are being given, is what they said. Of course, in few states, state government initiatives are aiding it. So there is no much burden on budget about rural housing. If it's clear, thanks to Kisan credit cards and PM Kisan's direct benefit transfers, which increased a lot during COVID time and till the election year, and now it has been reduced. They choose fiscal prudence and reduce the subsidy, which is direct subsidy, to give direct benefit transfer to Kisan or farmers, and that has been reduced now to 9.1 lakh crores. I think it's reduced to 9.21 in terms of beneficiaries. 9.21 crore farmers would be benefited, and you know, however, the crop benefit of 6,000 rupees would be given, and you could multiply to get the figure. Now, another one which is aiding rural area is MG Manrega. So, as part of Manrega employment, if you look at that, there was a decrease in last couple of years, slight decrease, at least there was a saturation. Now, at least slight increase has been estimated. Initial, of course, this scheme is demand-based allocation, but The initial disposal of funds as part of budget estimates is given here, and there is average days of employment. Earlier used to be as high as 100 as target. During COVID, it has decreased, and last year it was as low as 47. Now it is estimated to be 52.09. So employment it provided would be to 5.99 crores. That means around 6 crore people are choosing Manrega due to the huge unemployment which is evident here. And government acknowledges and tries to solve this. So if you understood this, as we discussed in last two parts, the subsidies given to the sectors has been reducing, which is seen here. And if you get the exact data on food, fertilizer, and even the total subsidies have been reducing. How much did that reduce? Which peaked during COVID times, it was at 7.58 lakh crores, with 1.28 being at fertilizer and 5.41 with food. Now it has reduced to mere 4.28 lakh crores, and that percentage of GDP calculation, 4.28% of the GDP, is considered as a fiscal prudence method, which will impact fiscal deficit targets as well. That's the reason fiscal deficit target, which was mentioned 5.1% as interim budget target, has been reduced to 4.9%. And if this is the case, will the poor who can't afford the food, will the cost of the food which would increase due to the fertilizer, isn't that not burden, was the question, and for which government justifies by saying the head count ratio, which is about the number of people who are suffering from multi-dimensional poverty, has reduced. So it has reduced from 55.3 in earlier days where Manrega has been started in those days. Now the latest data shows that it has come to 1/5 of it. That means 80% of people who were multidimensionally poor are no more multidimensionally poor, and only 11.3% are. So with this data, they would say that necessity to give subsidies are reduced and the step has been taken by government. Of course, the opposition argues the other side. Now, if this is the case, the other places where we need to focus on is about one, power sector, and other one is digital public infrastructure in agriculture field. 1.6 lakh crores have been allocated to digitize the agri sector. When I say digitize, what all things would come under digitizing the agriculture sector? The first one is digitizing the land records, next having digital records of enams and dynamic data about the crop availability, along with that the pricing, the rise in inflation with the dynamic data, so that they can come with market schemes like the interventions that they would do as part of Essential Commodities Act or something else. For that you need a proper data and the real-time data. That digitization is seen with digital public infrastructure creation, and even the schemes like Namo Didi drone schemes would be part of this. And with all these things, government is trying to modernize the sector. The expenditure would not be as traditional as earlier, and it would be in a new format to give its mark. And even the solar panels subsidy has been removed, as it's no more a sunrise industry. Now, when it comes to power sector, it also relates to the environment about how we are generating the power. The one part is making sure the agro energy sector having solar panels in the fields is aiding both farmers and the government's targets to meet the emissions reduction targets. But the reduction on solar panels will take a toll. Another subsidy that has been announced is to make sure 800 megawatt supercritical thermal power plants would be established, and the huge subsidy would be given to that. This is thermal power. Subsidy giving to thermal power or small hydro, which are not considered as renewable energy, might be a step on reverse direction, and this may impact our own credibility to promise about the reduction in emissions. If this is the case, of course, the earlier blended finance and the green finance that has been given for at least half a decade should play more role, and the private sector need to participate in changing towards greener economy is the expectation. Even the social sector with corporate social responsibility funds reaching 25,000 crores is something is worth mentioning. Now the last part, as we are speaking about the unemployment and the distress, government is aiming to provide subsidy and even to give a stipend kind of thing of 5,000 rupees per month to train around 1 crore youth in Fortune 500 companies. So the tie-up, though it is pre-promised, we need to look how this is going to impact, and it may be a good news at least on paper that the recruitments through railways etc. have been proposed, which may reduce the actual number of unemployed is what they are expecting. Will government be able to achieve its targets? Will government be able to meet what its promises are? It needs to be seen. At least as an overall impression, we could say this budget has promised less to make sure the targets are to be hit. Two things which are state specific are those given to Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh has been given an extra benefit of 15,000 crores to build its capital city and the Polavaram project. And when it comes to Bihar, the same flood and the rural infrastructure improvement in logistics are being aided. So as part of coalition government felt it is inevitable to ensure that the largest partners would get the benefits. So overall, this budget is mix of fiscal prudence, it's mix of the coalition politics, attempting new way to address the problems of rural economy, reduction in subsidies and increase in direct taxes as a share rather than going for indirect taxes. So the attempt is to reduce the inflation and address the issue of unemployment. Inflation and unemployment issues may be solved with this implementation of budget as it's been estimated. Let's hope that this budget may help common man to improve its lifestyle, and as a whole Indian economy's macroeconomic fundamentals may thrive. Let's hope best. Another day I'll be back with you with another conceptual video. Till then, thank you.